Imagine you've spent months researching a single stock. You've read every public filing, studied the management team, analyzed the competitive landscape. You are, by any reasonable measure, an informed investor. Now here is what the neuroscience suggests: you are more dangerous to your own wealth than you were before you started. Not less dangerous. More. This video is about the specific brain mechanism that converts expertise into miscalibration, and why some of the most intelligent professionals in the world are the least equipped to see it in themselves. The overconfidence bias is one of the most extensively documented phenomena in behavioral economics. Unlike many cognitive biases that appear only in controlled laboratory settings, this one has a measurable footprint across financial markets, medical diagnosis, geopolitical forecasting, and corporate strategy. What makes it unusually difficult to address is that it does not present as a bias. It presents as clarity. It presents as competence. Kahneman and Tversky's foundational work on judgment and decision-making established something that should be deeply uncomfortable to anyone who trusts their own analysis: how people actually make judgments diverges systematically from how they believe they make them. The gap between felt confidence and actual accuracy is not random noise. It has a direction. It consistently points one way. By the end of this video, you will understand the neurological mechanism behind that gap, what the research literature actually says about who is most at risk, why the conventional wisdom about experience and expertise points in the wrong direction, and what a science-grounded mitigation framework actually looks like. This is not a motivational framework. These are findings from peer-reviewed research, and they are not flattering to anyone who considers themselves a careful thinker. Start with the mechanism. Because once you understand what the brain is actually doing when it generates a confidence estimate, the rest of this becomes structurally obvious. Neuroscience research in this area suggests that self-assessment, the brain's process of evaluating its own competence, is not a neutral readout. It draws simultaneously on memory, pattern recognition, and emotional state. The regions associated with self-referential processing appear to show activity that is systematically biased toward positive self-evaluation. Importantly, research in this area indicates this is not a malfunction. From an evolutionary standpoint, a brain that generates moderate overconfidence in its own abilities may support faster decisions and greater persistence, both useful traits in an environment defined by physical threat and immediate reward. The problem is that those same circuits are now operating in financial markets, in complex estimation tasks, in long-horizon forecasting, environments where calibration matters far more than speed, and where the feedback loops that could correct miscalibration are slow, noisy, and often ambiguous. Here is where the research becomes particularly precise. The overconfidence effect does not appear uniform across all task types. Alpert and Raiffa found in 1982 that the bias is especially pronounced in tasks requiring estimation or prediction, rather than simple recall. Consider what that means for investment decisions. You are not remembering what a company earned last quarter. You are predicting what it will earn in the future. That is precisely the domain where the research shows overconfidence is most severe, and most resistant to correction. If this approach, research-grounded, no speculation, named researchers, is what you're looking for, subscribe. This channel covers the neuroscience of financial decision-making on a weekly basis. Calibration. That is the technical term researchers use for the alignment between confidence and accuracy. A perfectly calibrated forecaster, when they say they are 70% confident, is correct about 70% of the time. What Alpert and Raiffa documented is that people are systematically miscalibrated, their expressed confidence exceeds their actual accuracy, and this effect becomes more pronounced as the task becomes more difficult. This is not a small effect confined to novices. It appears across domains, across educational levels, and, this is the finding that should arrest anyone who relies on professional expertise, it appears among specialists. Philip Tetlock's research, published in 2005 and drawn from tracking hundreds of domain experts over nearly 2 decades, produced a finding that remains one of the most cited and most resisted in the social sciences: experts are not necessarily better at making predictions than non-experts. Their confidence in their judgments, Tetlock found, is often not justified by their actual forecasting performance. Deep specialization did not reliably produce superior accuracy. In many domains, it did not even produce accuracy that exceeded chance at a statistically meaningful level. What Tetlock's work reveals is that expertise and calibration are not equivalent. They are separable. You can accumulate years of genuine domain knowledge and become progressively worse at knowing how good your predictions actually are. The expert has more information, more elaborate frameworks, more pattern recognition heuristics. And the brain, confronted with that richness, generates proportionally stronger confidence, even when the predictive accuracy does not follow. Move now from the laboratory to the market. The behavioral economics literature has been tracing the financial footprint of overconfidence for decades, and the pattern is consistent. March and Shapira's research on managerial perspectives on risk, published in 1987, found that managers tend to be overconfident in their judgments and take on more risk than a rational analysis of the situation would support. Their framing of this finding is important. The excess risk-taking did not appear as deliberate gambling. It appeared as a genuine belief in the quality of their own assessment. They were not taking larger positions because they were reckless. They were taking larger positions because they sincerely believed they had correctly evaluated the odds. That distinction is critical. A reckless investor can be identified and corrected through incentives, oversight, or experience. An investor who is systematically miscalibrated, but has no felt sense of miscalibration, is nearly impossible to reach through normal feedback mechanisms. Kahneman and Tversky's work on decision-making under uncertainty further established that how information is encountered, the sequence, the framing, the emotional context at the moment of exposure, influences the decisions people make independently of the objective content of that information. Confidence, in this framework, is not a pure signal about information quality. It is partly a function of how that information was packaged and when it was received. Here is where most treatments of overconfidence stop. They have identified the bias, cited the studies, issued the warning. But the harder question, the one that most behavioral finance coverage avoids, is what you actually do with this information. Because knowing a bias exists does not make you immune to it. The research is explicit on this point. Kahneman himself has noted that understanding the mechanics of a cognitive illusion does not make the illusion disappear. What the research does point toward is a set of structural interventions, and they work differently from anything the self-help tradition recommends. The conventional mitigation advice for overconfidence follows a predictable script: be humble, stay open, consider alternative perspectives, learn from your mistakes. These are not harmful recommendations. But they locate the intervention at the attitudinal level, in how you feel about your own judgment, when the research suggests the mechanism is operating at a deeper, more automatic level than attitude can reliably reach. Taylor and Brown's 1988 research examined what they described as positive illusions, a cluster of self-enhancing cognitive tendencies that includes overconfidence, the illusion of control, and the self-serving attribution bias. Their work suggested that these tendencies are not randomly distributed errors. They appear to be systematically generated by neural architecture that also supports stable self-concept and emotional regulation. The implication is uncomfortable. The system that produces overconfidence may be partially the same system that maintains psychological functioning. You cannot simply instruct someone to disable their overconfidence mechanism and leave everything else intact. The systems are not cleanly separable. Gilovich and colleagues found that people give disproportionate weight to their own experiences and judgments relative to comparable data from others. The technical term is the inside view, your own analysis, your read of the specific situation in front of you, which systematically crowds out what researchers call the outside view, the base rate, the reference class, what actually happened to other people who faced comparable situations. This crowding effect is not random. It is stronger when you have more information about the specific case. Which means the more thoroughly you have researched a decision, the more the inside view dominates. The conventional advice, do more research, think harder, challenge your assumptions, addresses the content of the inside view. It does not address the structural dominance of the inside view itself. Kahneman and Lavallo's 1993 paper formalized the inside view and outside view distinction in a way that has direct practical application. The inside view is where virtually every decision process begins. You analyze the specific case, its particular features, its unique circumstances, your particular knowledge. The outside view forces a different question entirely: what happened to other people who were in a comparable situation? Not this investment, this company, this sector, but the reference class. What is the base rate for this category of decision? The research found that deliberately adopting an outside view can lead to more realistic forecasts and less risk-taking. The mechanism is structural, not attitudinal. You are not trying to feel less confident. You are changing the inputs to the decision by forcing in data that the inside view process naturally filters out. This matters because it bypasses the self-referential processing that generates inflated confidence in the first place. If your confidence is being partly produced by the richness of your inside view analysis, introducing base rate data as a formal step does not ask you to feel differently about your analysis. It asks you to weight it against a data set that your brain did not naturally generate. The question transforms from, "Do I believe in this opportunity?" to, "Of all the people who have held this level of conviction about this category of decision, what fraction were right?" That is a different question. And the evidence suggests it produces meaningfully different, and better calibrated, answers. What does a science-grounded practice actually look like in operation? 3 structural components, each grounded in the research covered here. First, pre-mortem analysis. Before committing to a decision, do not ask why it will succeed. Ask this: if this decision has failed 2 years from now, what was the cause? Research in this area suggests this technique partially offsets inside view dominance by forcing consideration of failure scenarios before the self-serving mechanisms that protect already made decisions have activated. You are running a failure simulation in the window when you are still genuinely open to changing course. Second, reference class forecasting. Identify the category your decision belongs to. Find the actual historical performance of that category. Weight it heavily before introducing your specific analysis. Kahneman and Lavallo's framework suggests this is among the most reliable structural interventions available, not because it eliminates overconfidence, but because it does not depend on your ability to monitor your own cognition in real time, which the research consistently shows is unreliable. Third, calibration tracking. Keep a record of decisions that logs not just the outcome, but the confidence level you assigned at the moment the decision was made. After a sufficient number of entries, research in this area suggests the pattern requires several dozen data points before it becomes reliable. You will have your own calibration profile. The goal is not to reach zero confidence. Calibrated confidence is a legitimate and useful decision input. The goal is to know, from your own data rather than from general feeling, which domains of your judgment are well calibrated and which characteristically are not. That knowledge changes what the confidence signal actually means when you receive it. The overconfidence bias is not a character flaw. It is not a failure of intelligence or discipline. It is a feature of human cognition that appears to have served survival purposes, and that now operates in environments it was not shaped for. The research does not offer a cure. Kahneman, Tetlock, Alpert, and their colleagues are consistent on this. Awareness of a bias is necessary but not sufficient to correct it. What the evidence does support is a set of structural practices: outside view, reference class forecasting, pre-mortem analysis, calibration tracking, that can partially offset what the brain does automatically, without requiring you to simply feel less confident. Subscribe to this channel if this method is useful to you. Peer-reviewed research, named researchers, no speculation, no motivational framing. Next video: why loss aversion appears to be an even more expensive bias than overconfidence, and what the neuroscience shows about the seconds before most investors make their worst decisions.